to another episode of Burn the Wagon. Today, my guest is going to be Cliff Taylor, the Ponca poet. So I'm going to invite him on real quick. So let me know if you get that, Cliff, that request. There we go. Cool.
Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, how you doing?
Doing pretty good.
Thanks
Very
for coming on. I really
good.
appreciate it.
Totally. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this.
Yeah, we're like you said, we're gonna burn some wagons today.
Okay, I'm down.
Cool. Okay, we'll just get it started with a quick little prayer that I always start off with, and then we'll get going into the questions that we got. I just
Cool.
want to send love to anybody that's struggling for mental health issues. I want to send love to anybody that's suffering from domestic violence issues. I want to send love to all our unhoused community. I want to send love to our Palestinian relatives. Lastly, I want to send love to the much precious Mother Earth that we're on today, and I am on Pomo territory. If you want to drop where you guys are tuning in from, that'd be great. My guest today is Cliff Taylor, the Ponca poet. So I just like to start off with just letting the person give themselves a little intro, and just we'll go from there, and letting the people know just whatever you feel like telling the people.
All right. Yeah. First off, thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. I guess my name is Cliff Taylor. I'm actually Cliff Taylor III. My dad is Cliff Taylor Jr. My grandpa was Cliff Sr. And I guess I always say I'm like a Ponca from Nebraska. I spent the first 34 years of my life in Nebraska, and I kind of thought I would spend forever in Nebraska. And I guess I feel like a lot of natives who find themselves speaking and sharing and kind of digging into the let's say like the wagon they're carrying behind them or pulling behind them. I feel like I got a long story at this point, but I'm out on the Oregon coast now. I think my partner and I, we've been here for about 5 years. I'm in Astoria, Oregon. It's kind of famous for being the place where the Goonies was made. So everyone here in Astoria is an honorary Goonie. And somehow I feel maybe I kind of feel that Astoria was waiting for one more indigenous Goonie. And so I'm really happy to be here. Astoria has treated my partner and I really well. And while I've been here, I've put out 2 books after being a writer for about 25 years, and kind of, you write all these books that nobody ever reads that kind of join all the others in your boxes of stuff that are traveling with you from place to place. I've put out 2 books, and it's been a totally radical joy to share these books with people, and to find myself sharing wherever these books get me little invitations to, like your super rad podcast, man. And I'm happy to kind of chat about wherever and kind of go wherever, and I guess follow the spirit of this moment and of this time. And yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's a good start. You can catch a flavor who I am and what I'm about. Yeah.
And what are those books called, and where can people find those?
Okay. The first book is called The Memory of Souls, and it's a little memoir about I guess I want to say it's a little memoir about some young, nameless Ponca kid born in the 80s who grew up in the 90s, and then as we flipped into a new century, that young kid found himself on a kind of, I want to say, like an immense healing journey that the ancestors had been safeguarding, not just for him, but for his entire tribe. And, that young nameless kid happens to be me. And so that first book is a memoir, and it's about the Sundance. It's about the little people. It's kind of about, the spirituality that kind of found me and kind of soaked me and kind of transformed me. And then the second book that I put out last year is called The Native Who Never Left, and it's a poetry collection. And I've been writing poetry for about 17 years. And if you want, I can uncork what all poetry means to me. But basically, I'm very passionate about the power of poetry and what it can do for everybody. And, whether you're writing it, whether you've been writing it, whether you've never written it, or whether you're just in the presence of, just some local community person who is opening up their heart and sharing it. And The Native Who Never Left is 106 poems. It's kind of a sequel in spirit to The Memory of Souls. And I like to think, all the stuff I'm writing is kind of this, inspired outsider artist kind of documentary of my people's, life and culture and consciousness and cosmos. And I'll be happy to talk more about that as we go along. But the books can be found on the dreaded Amazon. Let's turn Amazon into an apparatus we use that we're not used by, and maybe support some indigenous literature and other indie authors who are using that as kind of a platform to get their book out. But you can always DM me here on Instagram, and I'll happily send you a Goonie stamped, hand signed copy from the Oregon coast. Those are kind of the two best and easiest places. DM myself or go on Amazon.
Was the Goonies being filmed there like the ultimate thing that was like, that's why I want to move there? Or
well, I wish I could say that, but before I was here, I was in New Orleans with my partner, and I was in New Orleans for about a year. And before New Orleans, I was in Seattle. And basically, we wanted to kind of move back to the Pacific Northwest, but we wanted like smaller community and more nature. And we basically packed all of our belongings into our car, or I should say car number one, because car number one was not the car that ultimately got us here. It died along the way. And we knew we wanted to kind of go back to the Pacific Northwest, and we just kind of cross-country road tripped out this way, visiting all of my partner's friends and family, visiting all my friends and family. And the destination kind of evolved as we kind of traveled. And somehow Astoria kept a place that neither of us had on our maps, kind of kept materializing in the bullseye. And next thing you know, we found ourselves here. And my partner had never even seen the Goonies. And it's been a pretty cool place. I'm being from Nebraska, there's no mountains in Nebraska. There's oceans of like manufactured GMO corn, which does not comprise, necessarily a kind of ancient inspiring landscape, but is kind of like, the shitty camouflaged carpet of the ancient indigenous landscape. And there's no, giant ancient forests. And next thing you know, I found myself out here and kind of just instantly clicked with it all. I didn't see the ocean until I was 34. So I'm kind of making up for lost time. And basically there's been a tremendous amount of nature to explore and experience out here in the past 5 years. And it's been good medicine for me. Yeah. And it's been a huge bonus that the Goonies, I'm actually like 3 blocks away from the famous Goonies house. I live really close by it. And I kind of feel like that the town like self-generated this magical mascot so that it wouldn't get stuck with a shitty identity. And instead it has this kick-ass, misfit identity as the Goonie Town.
Yeah.
And I'm about that.
I mean, think about how many generations that movie still lives up, Like, it's like people are still showing their kids that movie. It's the same with like The Sandlot, Yeah.
As they should.
Yeah. So we got somebody asking if you feel comfortable sharing a bit of your poetry, and I think I super support that. If you feel comfortable with that too.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll tell you. Want me to read a poem?
Yeah.
I'll totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really, I've written tons of books actually, but tons of poetry, and I just love this book that came out because it's like it's like a memoir number 2. It's full of all these stories, and one of the things that helped me find kind of my identity, which was kind of not only lost like in the mists and fog of myself, but kind of like, I want to almost say like sent away by this kind of dominant American culture into the mists and fogs of myself to hopefully be permanently lost. But one of the things that helped me retrieve my identity and like find one of its hairs and start to pull it back until I found a bundle of hair, and pull that bundle of hair until I found, its scalp, and turn it around and say, hey, and it was like, hey, and then suddenly it was a reunion with myself. One of those things that was so key was just really from about age 20, 21 on, I really got active about just hanging out with other natives, hanging out with my relatives in kind of a more conscious way, and hearing all of their stories was just like, it was the stuff that helped me find all those lost pieces of myself. So this book is full of stories because, I mean, like a lot of natives, I believe stories are medicine. Stories are super powered medicine. Stories are sacred medicine. And a good story can help us find anything that we feel might be, forever lost. A good story can turn the forever lost thing into something we're holding in our hand, and we're kind of, let me read the poem. We're kind of doing the thing that, the mythology says of America cannot be done. And that is, we can't be Indians who are kind of, joyously birthing a future forward for everyone we love, non-Indian included, So I'll read a poem, and this is one of my, let's see if I can find one here. This is one of my favorite poems from the collection, I guess I'll just read it. It's called Blue Corn. My sister found an obsidian spearhead in a creek when she was young, and she kept it, knowing she had to, but not knowing why. She brought it to the sweat, and I marveled at it, like it was a sacred lens for seeing into the minds of our ancestors with. This thing she found helped her find herself, as it was intended to. I love that we find relics like these maybe once or twice in our lifetime. What is deemed impossible is not so to us natives. We reach our hand into the water and regularly find the sacred key to all of life. I believe in the power of us native people, and the stuff that we hear, I want to say even like the cool, casual, comical stuff, but also the legendary, inspiring, unbelievable stuff that we hear our ancestors were capable of doing. I like to, I guess I like to just remember aloud in public that we're capable of doing that stuff too. And it's not because we have to be, anyone who's born the special one, like born Neo for the Matrix. But if you're native, if you're indigenous, that indestructible power is still part, parcel, and present in you. And so that poem is kind of like about a coworker of mine. I work at the co-op. I'm a cashier. I'm not like, some giant important mover and shaker. I'm selling people their organic food. I'm talking to people about where they can find the Goonies house if they've never seen it before. But that story is about a coworker of mine. And when she was young, she's a Dene girl. And when she was young, she found this spearhead. And she had her own journey. And it took her a long time to, become, I guess, actively on that path of reconnecting, I guess you'd say. But she had carried that spearhead with her all that time. And I kind of felt like, that spearhead was like both this promise from her ancestors that, this stuff that you don't even know about now, that when you get older, you're going to feel like you were deprived of. It's been with you all along. And when the time is right, it's going to start to bloom and blossom and flower and fill up your life. So it was a promise from the ancestors, but it also was like ancestor intervention. Our ancestors are always intervening in all these potent ways to help us, because none of us is lost or uncared for in their eyes, and they recognize and understand that the colossal craziness and complexity of colonization and kind of the dark, twisted funhouse America. So they're always intervening, and that poem is kind of a little a little story of that, I guess.
I love it. I love the part about the obsidian looking like it's into the like the ancestors past. Or, yeah, I really like that part. I write some poetry here and there too. So like I'm super about it. Do you remember the first person that's like, oh, you should write some poetry, or when you're
So,
when you no, go ahead, my bad.
oh no, go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, complete your quick. Go ahead, man. Yeah.
Just,
This
I was just gonna say who was what was the pushing point for you to like get into poetry?
well, it's it's a it's a bit of a story, and maybe telling the story can kind of touch on some of the points of maybe why we're here or whatever. And like when I was a teenager, I was full of anger, full of depression, full of self-hate. I'm in a tiny rural nowheresville town in Nebraska, and lots of surrounded by lots of alcoholism, lots of abuse, all of that stuff. And you kind of feel like um, you're just this worthless person that nobody cares about, and your destiny is to either fall through the cracks or to become another, like a reproduction of what you grew up around. Maybe lots of kind of I grew up in trailer court, just like you're supposed to just be another drunk Indian in the trailer court who everybody kind of looks at as some character until they die off and are completely forgotten. I kind of felt like that path was very thickly laid out before me, and all sorts of forces in the world were whispering like, yep, that's for you, go that way, go that way. But I had a couple aces up my sleeve, you could say. And one of the big aces was, since I was young, I was into art. I was into comic books, I was into horror movies, and then when I was a teenager, I kind of got big time into reading. And the message of art is different. The message of art is like, finding your power through these beautiful experiences that are part of humanity's heritage, using your creativity, using your imagination. And so when I was a teenager, I did all sorts of writing. I wrote poetry when I was a teenager, but this is some, I kind of came from like the native tough man school, like a lot of us were raised in. You're silent, you get in lots of fist fights, you don't talk about your feelings, and you always present as ready to rumble, ready to rock, ready to do what's needed. And that's kind of like, they tried to kill us, but we're warriors, and look at us, we can't be killed. But that can kind of tilt into this kind of, kind of this poison generating configuration, poison for all these different parts of us that, maybe different than just the strict warrior tough guy mold. So I was basically embarrassed about my poetry because, I didn't want my relatives to see this like weak, wimpy, sensitive guy. So I kind of didn't really share about it, and I kind of dropped doing it. And then in the beginning of my book, there's a little origin story of how I kind of was, pulled back in to poetry, instead of getting pulled back into that, that other life, I was pulled back into poetry. I worked at this gas station for 10 years. And when I was 25, I started working at that gas station. And I was getting visited by these feelings that were so full bodied and inspiring and beautiful that they kind of compelled me to start putting what I was feeling down into poetry so that I could share it. Because whatever you put in a poem, you can then hand to that poem, and that another person can drink it, and suddenly they can drink a beautiful memory. They can drink a beautiful experience. They can drink a moment of inspiration. So when I was 25, then I got back into poetry. And even then, for several years, I did it privately in my cave, in my closet, not telling anybody about it. And it was all connected to this long journey of basically getting comfortable with myself and kind of maybe outgrowing this kind of one mode that I inherited from my, from my father and from the men around me of being, just a tough ass dude. And I realized, well, I am a tough ass dude, but I'm also more than that too. I'm a guy who likes to put the ineffable, the unsayable, the unsaid, the unspoken into lines of words, into sentences, in the name of the healing that's possible for all of us, in the name of the value we have lost, in the name of the reality that says, if you're Indian, you're not actually worthless, but that you are from top to bottom, beautiful, and you are here for a purpose, and you are, full of your ancestors' tears. You're full of your ancestors' prayers. You're full of your ancestors' love. And that, by definition, is not worthless. That's beautiful. So I like poetry. I love poetry. And I think I needed to do something like that so that I could be a part of that work of empowering other natives to be true to themselves too, whatever it may be. And can I share something that's coming to my mind?
Yeah.
I have a really close brother. He's a Lakota language teacher on Standing Rock on Fort Yates, and he's been kind of my collaborator, brother, buddy since we met when I was about 25. I'm 42 now, so 17 years. And I remember I would have these long conversations with him, and he's really smart, really deep, really soulful, and kind of a funny guy too. But I would kind of talk to him about all this stuff. And one time he told me that he heard something from a very reliable source, from an elder. And it was like an elder who was universally looked up to. So everything that elder said, everybody really listened to. Even if they didn't get along with each other, even if all the various families didn't get along, when this elder spoke, it was kind of like everyone really listened. And he quoted something that he had heard this elder say when he was kind of in his presence. And the elder said, don't be afraid to be a different kind of Indian. And, the elder said, when I was young, I was a different kind of Indian too, And people kind of, when that elder said that, it would kind of like turn some different things on their head, because we're all trying to figure out, how to be Indian, how to be native, how to be indigenous. And we get all these models in our mind that we then try to fulfill. And, a lot of times we'll create a model in our mind that doesn't match up with either our destiny or the reality of how a human life actually is in all of its kind of, jumbled glory. And so we might beat ourselves up, or we might feel like we're an imposter, or we might feel like we're not good enough. And suddenly this elder is saying, when I was young, I was a different kind of Indian. And suddenly everybody in the room who had that piece of themselves that was like, well, I'm actually a little different. I'm not a carbon copy. I don't match up to this. He was empowering them to say, exactly as you are, let grow. You're Indian too. You don't get disqualified from being Indian because you can't check this box, check that box, check this box, check that box. The elder was saying, I was different when I was growing up. And when I heard that, when my friend shared that little piece at a Chinese buffet in Bismarck, North Dakota, while we were all chowing down, eating beef broccoli, it really was like the kind of blessing. I think I'm going to be a a poet. I think I'm going to write my crazy stories. I think I'm going to write my, my memoir and stuff like that. So I guess I needed to go through that experience, and I try to put that experience in a lot of my poetry because I want to empower people to love themselves exactly as they are. Then suddenly they're a powerful native, they're a powerful indigenous person, and they can, kind of reverse this curse of constantly hearing all the things that disqualify us from being a Ponca, from being, a Lakota, from being a Dene. All these, oh, you're not enough, you're disqualified. I want to undo that. I want to be a part of the movement of undoing that, and instead help people just breathe in why they are qualified to be a badass native just because they are, just because they are. And they can be, they can become is it Maria Tallchief, the famous Osage ballerina dancer? I might be wrong on that, but basically they can be a ballerina dancer. We can be anything and still be native. And that's how we're going to transform the landscape of the culture. And suddenly the culture is not going to tilt in a way that's always trying to have natives fall out to their death in the ocean. The culture is going to tilt to the way where it's starting to be more indigenous than it is colonized. That's the dream that I'm trying to communicate forward into time, into culture, into reality. America, which we really know is Turtle Island, it's on a path to tilt to indigenosity. It already is more indigenous than it is America, but a lot of people are kind of swimming on the surface and they don't know that. But if you kind of peer down, you see that, oh, it actually is more indigenous. And the cool thing about indigenous reality is it includes everybody because it's built on all these human basics that are land related, that are spirit close, that are ancestor vibing, that are plant loving, that are ritual knowing. Okay, that's not. I gotta go. Yeah, I better let you say. You get me going, man. I don't know. I'm getting. I got my Ponca dictionary beside me. I got my poetry. I got my little Bigfoot statue. I guess I'm getting pumped up or something.
You're good. Keep going. I mean, I'm not tripping. I just relate to that so well. Like there's nothing I can say that you didn't say because I relate. Like I didn't pull out my poetry until I started getting sober, which was 4 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's the same exact thing. Because just like growing up, it's just like you're supposed to be a man. You're supposed to not have feelings. And I wanted to do things like theater, and I wanted to be like in those spaces, but didn't like go for it because like I thought people around me, oh, that's that's feminine. Why are you doing that? So like hearing that is like, oh, the people are going through that even over the same thing all the way in Nebraska, and I'm on a res here in California. So we have the same struggles but like people like me and you hopefully are going to change that narrative and inspire people to do things like this. And that's why I started this podcast, is because I'm tired of seeing like in the movies the same native character in every single movie. So like there's all kind of different people out there in native country, so like I really wanted to highlight that. And like it's just I'm tired of seeing that same thing, same person in every single movie, every single show, or so just like we come in all shapes and sizes, all shades, you know what I mean? So, and like I definitely love everything you said because it's like I relate to it so well, and being able to like amplify that and get that out there to other people, because think about one person, even if they don't see that what you're saying today, 5 years from now could see it and come across it and be like, I really connect with that. I'm going to change my mindset now. Like exactly what the relative said in the beef, when you got to chowing down on beef and broccoli, what you said might get to them exactly what happened to you. So that's also why I started this podcast.
Well, thank you for starting this podcast, and thank you for getting all these kind of conversations out there. One of the things I was thinking about, like leading up to this, I was thinking about what are we going to talk about, and I was kind of flashing back to, maybe I was in my early 20s, and like I got my first laptop from Walmart, and I got the internet for the first time, and it's like I remember when YouTube came into existence, and I was like, okay, my buddy showed me this YouTube thing at his house, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go on this YouTube thing. And the first thing I felt like I was like some like real kind of dorky grandpa with 2 fingers, and I'm like, okay, I go into the search bar of YouTube, and with my 2 fingers, I type in Native American, and like 2 videos come up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it was like, but it was even then I could feel like what was possible. Like, you mean I'm not just going to be alone in my apartment, but there's this technology that's coming into being where I can like connect with natives or see native content, you know? And now look at it. Now it's like flash forward, I don't know if it's like 15, 17 years later, there's all this I want to say there's all this community, there's all this representation, there's all this expression, there's all these conversations, and they are doing exactly what this podcast is doing and what you're saying. Suddenly, you know, we're seeing ourselves, you know, and when we see ourselves, we're like, oh, I do belong. I am a part of things. I do have a place in this world. You know, I'm not the guy nobody knows. I'm not the woman who everybody forgets, but actually, you know, there's community for me. And when we kind of develop those like connecting with community skills online, it feeds the connecting with community skills in person, in the flesh. And so it's kind of like, you know, both the communities are growing digitally and in the real world in these completely fantastic, completely accelerated and expansive ways that, you know, flash back to, like I said, when I was 23, like, you know, typing in Ponca, there's not a Ponca video on YouTube, you know, but now there's crap loads, you know, so there's Poncas who are not in Nebraska and who are everywhere that can feed that identity. And then they can just be assets to their community. They can be cool neighbors. They can be all these things because they feel like cool and strong, and like they got good self-worth, and they feel their ancestors walking with them. You know, I love it. I love it. And I just can continue to look forward to how everything continues to just, you know, the shit melts away and the beautiful stuff grows stronger. You know, that's what I believe in. So,
You
hell yeah.
know what's
Thanks for being a part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what's crazy is because I followed you. I followed you for a bit, and then I got a buddy named Zach
Oh
Scheinman.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
then he was like, you know, you should interview for your podcast. And he was like, my buddy named Cliff. And I was like, oh, I follow him already. Let's make it happen. So it was like, it was just beautiful, just the community.
Shout
You
out
know
to
what I
Zach.
mean?
Shout out to honorary Goonie Zach. Zach's been here. He's visited us. He's cool. He's a cool brother.
Yeah, I've been really connecting with Zach a lot lately, and he's been telling me the stories about you guys going to Sundance and all that type of thing
Oh
too.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's beautiful, and it's like, can you speak on that a little bit?
Speak on the Sundance?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me see. I think I was I think I was 21, and you know, I'd never been to a Sundance before, and basically, you know, I kind of got in like Flynn with this really kind of, you know, compassionate circle in Lincoln, Nebraska, where I lived for 15 years. And yeah, I got involved in the Sundance. I started Sundancing. You know, I've continued to Sundance. And, you know, I would just say like nothing has transformed my life like the Sundance. And, you know, to kind of open that up and to unpack that a little bit, it would be because, you know, I had been to powwows when I was young. I had been to my tribe's powwows when I was young. And that was like immersive, and it was invigorating, and it was scary because, you know, it's like, where do I fit in all this? When you're young, it's almost like when you're a young native person, a lot of times it can feel like your trauma is overshadowing your kind of innate native intelligence that might be able to like, oh, I get this. I want to be a part of this. I see where I fit in this. All that kind of innate indigenous intelligence is kind of, in the I want to say like in the shadow of the mountain of our trauma, so it's like, is it even there? Is it even there anymore? It's only the trauma mountain, so I kind of felt like that. And then when I went to my first Sundance, whew, basically indescribable experience after indescribable experience after indescribable experience. But some of what I can share is, I was getting to be around elders and relatives who really potently and in a deeply human and soulful way embodied our culture, embodied, revitalized Plains Indian culture, Ponca culture, Lakota culture. Those are kind of where I came up, and being around like hundreds of natives who embodied this kind of daily tended, central focus of their life connection to the creator, to the land, to cultural regeneration, to the ancestors, to treating each other in a way that didn't perpetuate trauma, but that fed hope, fed health, fed healing. Just being in the midst of that, it was like, going from desert to days of healing rain, a lifetime of being in the desert to, we'll actually say 8 days of being in a healing rain. And, it helped me have different ideas about what I could do. And not like I was suddenly like, oh man, I'm gonna, I'm, as we called it back then, it's like, I'm gonna become the next Superman. I'm gonna become the next super native, hero leader guy. It just made me feel like, it's like, honestly, it made me feel like I had, I didn't have to be this kind of like orphan status, but that there was a home for me. There was a circle for me. There were relatives for me. And a lot of these older folks treated me with so much love, with so much generosity. And they had rivers of life stories flowing through them that would just fill you up. And every kind of story they had to share from their life, they were generously sharing on a road trip, in ceremony, at the kitchen table. And like flashing back to the beginning, all those stories were just helping me find myself. They were but they were also feeding, I want to say, my own dreaming capacity, both as like a human who daydreams about what's possible for his tribe and for our native people and for humanity. But they were also feeding my dreaming capacity as an indigenous person who, you know, down the road was going to find himself talking about how, how important it is to be in touch with this nighttime dreaming capacity we have, where we can receive help and guidance and experience and gifts from the spirits and the ancestors. And then suddenly we have authentic items that have been given to us by the caretakers of our tribe and people. And when you carry those items, then suddenly you have this responsibility, this mature responsibility starts to grow in you, and you start to see it. You're here to serve something larger than yourself. You're here for reasons that are bigger than yourself, and this whole different paradigm and universe of being begins to be how you live and be you. And then suddenly you're matching up with your people, and you're not matching up with the designs of colonization, which wanted to erase you. And all of that stuff is just like a domino effect thing. So Sundance was kind of like, I almost want to say like, it pushed down the dominoes that are falling down to this moment. And it's just, and forming this beautiful shape of, revived, Ponca culture and spirituality for me, So I love the dancing. I love the singing. I love the campfire storytelling. I love the overeating. I love the family reunion of seeing people you haven't seen since last year. I love the powerful prayers. I love the tears. I love the grief. I love going to places emotionally that maybe you don't feel you can go at any other time of the year, but when you're in the the safety and the power of that grand ceremony of your people, I love all of that and more. And all of that and more was present at my first Sundance. You know, it was like an introduction to the thing for me that indigenous people all across Turtle Island are looking for in one way, shape, form, or another. So the Sundance, you know, it's like it's my way of life. It's how I live, and I love
That's
it.
beautiful. And ceremony is beautiful, and no matter however you find that ceremony, you know, for whatever that may to be to you, and that's beautiful. You know, whoever finds that situation like you were in, that's beautiful. And that eye-opening thing, you know, that like you said, that knocks all the dominoes down to create this, you know, is beautiful. And me becoming sober, I can just relate. Becoming sober, that same type of thing happened to me, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're here to help each other find our way, you know? And so every relative you meet, I guess, native or
Yeah.
non-native, we're here to help each other find our way. None of us wants to be lost. You know, none of us wants to feel like, what's the point? Feel like we're living a purposeless life. We want to help each other find our way so that we are all living the kind of life that we came here to live. And that's a life of purpose, meaning, soul, beauty, family, and kind of like ineffable spirituality that is so awesome and beautiful, it's beyond description. And it's our everyday reality, everyday part. You know, we're here to help each other find our way.
Absolutely. And do you guys, is there a reservation for your tribe, or is that not a thing for you guys?
Well, uh, I mean, it's like, you know, before reservations existed, you know, we had a place we lived, you know, like a lot of people, you could say like forever. And it's where the Niobrara River intersects with the Missouri River. And, you know, big story, but the long story short, you know, is like we had our dealings, you know, the treaties were broken, and basically we were all death marched down to Oklahoma. And, you know, within the first, yeah, I mean, it's such a big story, but within the first year of being there, like 1/3 of our tribe died. You know, of course they place you at this inhospitable place. They don't deliver on the supplies or the materials that they promised, and they just leave you there in a completely different climate, in a completely different land, with no supplies to, you know, survive kinds of winters you had never experienced before in terrains that were completely unknown to you. And you know, uh, my great grandpa is Chief Standing Bear, and there was kind of this thing that happened that you know, changed our course, my tribe's course. And basically, you know, his son was one of the ones who passed in that first year. And his son, you know, had this deathbed promise, and he asked, you know, his dad to, you know, bury me in, you know, bury me in our lands, you know, bury me where we've been burying, you know, each other for, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years. And basically, Chief Standing Bear, you know, he asked the Indian agents, because we had no rights. We were like not seen as people. We were wards of the state. We were like animals in a pen, or you know, subhuman humanoids in some, you know, prison in their eyes. And you know, he asked the Indian agent, you know, can I go back to Nebraska and bury my son? And of course, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. The reasons why all of these kind of officials said we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that, in the hundreds of thousands of instances all across Turtle Island, in that, say, well, you could say in those times up until now, were just ludicrous. We're just bullshit. But of course, no, you couldn't leave. But long story short, under the cover of night, Standing Bear took off with about 15 others and his son's, body in a burlap sack and no supplies, and snuck off back to Nebraska. It's like, the moccasins were wearing out and people are walking barefoot in snow, suffering frostbite, all to get back home so that he could honor his son's dying last request. And, he got close, and we were with our Omaha relatives who were putting us up after a number of kind farmers, kind white people helped us because they saw the shabby shape we were in, and they also saw that we were decent, real, honorable human beings. We got there, and basically Standing Bear was arrested. And, he was just within like a day's travel practically from our homelands. And basically, we're going to send you all back to Oklahoma. And, it's like you made it this far, but it'll upset too much of what we want to have happen for all of you Native people if we let one of you go bury your son, bury your children back in your homelands, which, we already have other designs on. So, basically there was this court case, and this newspaper man, General Indian killer, General Crook himself, who had tired of the gross injustices he was being utilized to be an instrument for, these folks backed Standing Bear, and they told him, let's do this court case, and let's basically see if we can, basically they did this court case, and Standing Bear won the court case. And the court case was the first instance where the judge admitted in a U.S. court that Indians are human beings within the eyes of the law. So from that point on, that was a domino effect that we're feeling to this day. And so if you're a human being within the eyes of the law, you have rights. You're no longer a subhuman thing or an animal or a ward of the state. So basically, Standing Bear, he got back to our homelands. He buried his son, and about a big chunk, maybe close to half of our people down in Oklahoma came back to our homelands. And so we have the southern Poncas, the Ponca tribe of Oklahoma, and we have the northern Poncas, the Ponca tribe of Nebraska. And we did have a reservation, and it was eventually broken up into allotments, and it was sold off. So like when my grandpa was alive, Cliff Taylor III, or Cliff Sr., there was a reservation. He had an allotment. He sold it. He got in a car wreck, and it was gone. And then my tribe, we were eliminated as a federally recognized tribe in the late 60s. There was 448 of us on the enrollment sheets. And again, this kind of never-ending campaign of how can we disappear you all? How can we make you go away? How can we, pretend you don't exist until you don't exist anymore, until you're starting to pretend you don't exist, And so then we lost our federal recognition, and there was so many Poncas that were like, okay, they don't get to decide if we don't exist. We look at each other and we exist. Our ancestors tell us we exist. And if this is the setup of the land we're living in, then we're going to fight to get our recognition back, because if that piece is a part of existing in these times, we are worthy of having that piece. And so in 1990, we got our federal recognition back. And this is what I tell people, it was signed by, we were signed back in by George W. Bush Sr., but in the negotiations, there was one precondition. And you know what the precondition was? They gave us our status back as a federally recognized tribe in 1990 if we would submit to one precondition. And that precondition was, you must agree to never have a reservation again. And I am we agreed to that instead of a reservation, we have these service areas in the kind of major towns in Nebraska where the majority of our Ponca population is spread across. And those service areas function for all intents and purposes like chunks of reservation. And, they're kind of like our home bases, our operation. But I just, like so many, what a thing for them to make us agree to, because they know our power, our identity, our future, and our everything as sovereign nations and as tribal peoples is rooted in, connected to, and one with the land. And I'm not, since I didn't grow up on a reservation, I can't claim to be an expert on on reservations, but I just feel like they thought, we're going to give them their federal recognition back, but let's I want to say, like, let's sneak in this thing that will kill them in the long run. And that's that they'll never be able to have the land where tons of our people still live, where we have our powwow, where we have our cemetery, where we have our buffalo our buffalo herd. All of that stuff, our stronghold for our Ponca people is on the actual land that was our land before the reservation system existed, that was our land while the reservation system came into being, and that is our land today. So we're still there. We're land backing it. We're buying it back, but God forbid they let us have it as, a full-blown functional, acknowledged reservation, So that's like the broad strokes on the backstory of my people, So a lot of us Poncas, we didn't grow up on a reservation, and yeah. So I mean, I want to say this: we are the ancestors' answer to that question of how you can have your Ponca tribal identity if there isn't a home-based reservation for you. So us Poncas living today, like many natives who are in a similar situation, we're the ancestors' answer to that, because the ancestors are constantly providing us with creative, imaginative, innovative, and I want to say powerhouse solutions to these life riddles that we find ourselves encased in or encaged in, because we're not meant to be encased. We're not a museum piece who's meant to be encased, and we're not a thing of the past that's meant to be encaged. We're meant to be liberated. We're meant to be happy. We're meant to be humans who know how to love the earth, who know how to have a good time, and who are carrying these medicines of our respective nations forward for the generations who are still coming. And the ancestors, they're constantly like, they're slipping us schematics between all the invisible bars of the barriers we find ourselves encountering, to help us experience time and time again that there's a bigger story that the barriers don't define, but that they and us are rooted in. And that's the story we're here to tell. The indigenous story, Mother Earth's story, the story of the plants, the story of the animals, and the story of the cosmos. The story of the cosmos.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for coming on today, Cliff. We only got 5 minutes left. I really appreciate you coming on, telling the stories. I can listen to you talk and do poetry all day. We got some people that's commenting some beautiful things. Thank you for everybody that's watching. So yeah, I look forward to everything you're doing. I hope you have a book reading coming up, or did it already happen?
I did a reading last week at the co-op. It was the first time I ever shared some poetry and shared talk like this inside a grocery store. But how else are you going to radically transform the culture we're all living in if you don't bring this stuff to the actual places that we're living in? So they asked me, and I said, yeah, let's
Cool.
do it. But can I plug two things?
Yeah,
quick?
absolutely.
One, I just started a Patreon, and you can find it through my Instagram. It's called the Ponca Poets Podcast, and it's kind of like poem sharing, storytelling, movie reviewing. It's something I'm kind of doing for fun. It's kind of like an adventure experiment thing, so people can check that out. And then also later this summer, the North Dakota State University is going to put out an essay collection of mine called "The Shining Hands of My Ponca Ancestors." So I have these two books out. And if you dig them, if you like the vibe of what I'm sharing, keep your eyes out for that. I poured my heart and soul into that book and into these books, and I really am grateful that I get to be alive and defy the odds of dying at a young age, so that I can share some of these stories.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
I love it, and I'm happy to cross paths, and I'm happy to I want to definitely get one of those books for sure. So yeah, I'll be looking out for whatever you got coming forward, and I really appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you. Let's cross paths. Let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely, and we got a mutual friend, so either you got to come out here, or we both of us got to go out there. So yeah, let's do it. All right, cool. Thank you.
Okay, later, brother.
All right, thank you so much, everyone that tuned in today. Thank you, everyone that commented. If you want to leave a comment where you guys are watching from, I'm from Pomo territory. Definitely look out for anything we got coming forward. Got a couple shows in San Francisco, maybe next month. Give us a follow on the Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, all of it. Thank you guys so much, and free Palestine, and peace and love, y'all.